They lied to you your whole life. They told you to be a good person, to be patient, to be fair, to forgive, to avoid conflict, to keep your head down and trust that honesty would somehow carry you to the top. But deep down, beneath all that politeness, all that obedience, all that forced humility, you've always felt something was wrong with that script. You've seen ruthless men rise while you were taught to stay harmless. You've watched calculated players win while you were told that intentions mattered more than outcomes. And every time you tried to play fair, the world punished you for it. This story isn't about right or wrong. This is about reality. The reality the powerful use but never speak about. The reality that decides who commands and who obeys. Today you stop being harmless. Today you see the world the way winners see it. You grow up believing the world is fair because every authority you ever encountered needed you to believe that. Parents wanted a peaceful child. Teachers wanted a compliant student. Society wanted a predictable citizen who doesn't question the system, doesn't disrupt the order, doesn't challenge the hierarchy. And to make sure you stayed obedient, they sold you a moral fantasy that being good is the same as being successful, that intentions matter more than results, that patience and kindness guarantee stability, that fairness is the foundation of power. But as you became older, as life started showing you its teeth, you began to feel the cracks in that story. The people who win don't follow the rules you were raised with. They follow a different playbook, one that no one ever hands to you openly. You've seen it. You've felt it. Maybe you didn't have the words, but your instincts whispered it every time you watched someone less talented outrun you. Every time someone with half your morals but double your boldness walked past you, climbed over you, took what you hesitated to reach for. While you were debating the right way, they were executing the effective way. While you were afraid of looking bad, they were focused on the finish line. While you were keeping your hands clean, they were getting theirs dirty, then shaking hands with the world as if nothing happened. And society just nodded and applauded them. That was the moment, whether you admit it or not, when a seed of doubt sprouted inside you. A question you were too ashamed to ask out loud. Does being good even matter if the world only rewards being effective? But before you could explore that thought, you buried it under more conditioning. After all, no one wants to be seen as immoral, so you forced yourself back into the script, pretending you didn't notice how the game was really played. You learned to smile when you were angry, to say, "It's fine," when it wasn't, to swallow your ambition because someone told you ambition is dangerous unless it is humble and polite. You learned to avoid conflict, even when conflict was the only path forward. You learned to prioritize innocence over impact, reputation over results, comfort over victory. You learned to be harmless, and harmless people get hurt the easiest. You know this. You've lived this. You've watched people walk all over you simply because they knew you wouldn't fight back. You've watched opportunities slip through your fingers because you were too afraid of disappointing someone. You wasted months, even years, trying to prove you were a good person instead of a strong one. And the cruelest part? Nobody cared. Nobody rewarded you. Nobody admired you for it. In fact, the world expected you to suffer quietly. Harmlessness isn't respected. It's exploited. There is a reason powerful people never preach the philosophy they live by. They need the majority to follow the morality that keeps them docile. So they teach the masses that purity is virtue, but behind closed doors, behind boardrooms, behind elections, behind empires, they operate by a single measure: results. Intentions don't pay bills. Goodness doesn't win wars. Kindness doesn't build empires. Impact does. And once you understand that, the world stops looking confusing and starts looking brutally clear. You begin to understand why people in power protect outcomes while preaching intentions, why they talk about fairness after they win, not before, why they romanticize morality after victory, not during the climb. Because winners rewrite morality. They don't follow it. They shape it. You start realizing why your goodness never shielded you, why your honesty never guaranteed trust, why your patience never produced progress, because you were following a moral script designed to benefit someone else. You were playing a game without seeing the board. You were believing in rules that don't exist for those who actually win. You look back at every moment you hesitated, every opportunity you didn't take, every time you stayed silent to avoid judgment, and suddenly it hits you. You weren't protecting your morality, you were protecting your fear. Fear of being disliked, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being called the villain. That fear kept you small. It kept you obedient. It kept you morally clean, but painfully ineffective. The truth is simple. The world doesn't care about your purity. It cares about your impact. People only respect what affects them. Weakness doesn't inspire loyalty. Harmlessness doesn't inspire trust. Niceness doesn't build value. Only strength does. But strength isn't loud. It isn't aggressive. It isn't violent. The strongest people aren't the ones who yell or intimidate. They are the ones who make decisions without needing the world's approval. They choose outcomes over applause. They choose effectiveness over innocence. They choose to carry the weight of necessary decisions rather than hide behind excuses. And they understand something you were never taught. Every meaningful victory has victims. Every rise creates discomfort. Every step forward forces someone else to step back. Every boundary you enforce disappoints someone. Every standard you raise offends someone. Every success requires sacrifice, sometimes yours, sometimes someone else's. That's the price of real life. That's the price of real power. The moment you stop fearing that reality, everything changes. Your mind sharpens. Your instincts awaken. You start recognizing manipulation disguised as morality. You start noticing how people guilt-trip you to keep you in a place of service while they elevate themselves. You begin to understand that morality is often used to restrain you, not guide you. You see how society romanticizes suffering only when it's suffered by the obedient. You see how the world celebrates resilience but demands you stay fragile. Something inside you snaps. Not in a destructive way, but in a liberating way. You feel the first spark of independence, the first taste of a mind that thinks for itself, the first rise of a man who has finally stopped begging for permission to live effectively. You start rejecting the idea that you must choose between being good and being powerful. You realize you can be responsible without being harmless. You can be strategic without being evil. You can be respectful without being submissive. You can be moral without being manipulated. And suddenly, you are no longer afraid of discomfort. You are no longer afraid of judgment. You are no longer afraid of stepping into a version of yourself that actually gets things done. Because now, for the first time in your life, you see the game. You see the truth behind the truth. You see what the powerful have always known but never said out loud. Morality is beautiful, but it is not enough. Good intentions are comforting, but they are not currency. Harmlessness is praised, but it is not rewarded. And innocence is admired only when it stays weak. The world respects the man who brings results, even if they judge the methods. The world remembers the man who creates impact, even if they criticize the journey. The world fears the man who knows how to be dangerous, but chooses not to unleash it. And that's the man you must become. Not a villain, not a saint, but someone who understands that clean hands and empty hands often look the same. Someone who realizes that staying innocent can cost you everything you ever wanted. Someone who chooses to live in reality instead of comforting fantasies. Someone who embraces the truth Machiavelli understood centuries ago. The end doesn't always justify the means, but without the end, the means don't matter. Welcome to the real beginning. You don't wake up one morning and decide to be ruthless. No man does. It happens slowly, quietly, like a truth that was always there, but you never had the courage to look at directly. The world pushes you, squeezes you, tests you, disappoints you, betrays you, until one day you finally understand that softness is not kindness and harshness is not cruelty. Sometimes softness is weakness and harshness is responsibility. And the moment this realization lands, the entire map of life redraws itself in front of you. You start seeing that behind every comfortable life someone enjoys, there were hard decisions someone else made. Behind every peaceful moment, someone fought a battle you never saw. Behind every leader who inspires millions, there are scars, sacrifices, and burdens they carry in silence. Behind every empire, there is a graveyard of decisions that the world will never forgive, but will always benefit from. But you were taught to fear the exact decisions that build anything meaningful. You were raised to think that avoiding pain keeps you moral, that refusing conflict keeps you righteous, that staying passive keeps you innocent. And maybe that lie served you when you were a child. But adulthood is not a playground. It is a battleground. And on battlegrounds, innocence is not safety. It is vulnerability. You've lived long enough to see how avoiding hard decisions creates even bigger problems. You've experienced moments where you knew what had to be done, but fear held your hand down. You let people cross your boundaries because you didn't want to seem rude. You let opportunities slip because you didn't want to risk backlash. You forgave what should have been confronted. You endured what should have been ended. You stayed silent when you should have spoken. You stayed put when you should have walked away. And every time you avoided necessary conflict, life punished you for it. That punishment is what Machiavelli calls the price of clean hands. The belief that innocence protects you is the reason so many people suffer quietly. Because life does not reward purity, it rewards courage. And courage is not the absence of fear, it is the ability to act despite fear. To do what must be done, even when your heart shakes, your stomach tightens, your conscience whispers, "What will people think?" People will think whatever benefits them. You must act in ways that benefit you. The shift begins when you recognize that necessary evil is not evil at all. It is a responsibility. The real evil is avoiding the responsibility that only you can carry. The real evil is letting your fear create consequences that others must suffer. The real evil is refusing to take the shot because you want to protect your image, not your mission. And this is where you start learning the difference between stupid evil and necessary evil. Stupid evil is emotional. Anger, ego, insecurity, instant reaction, uncalculated damage. It is weak, reckless, childish. Necessary evil is cold, calculated, controlled, strategic, deliberate. It is surgical, not explosive. It protects more people than it harms. It aims to secure the greater outcome, not feed a personal wound. Necessary evil is done with a steady hand, not a trembling heart. But here's the twist. The world will accuse you of the same thing in both cases. They won't understand your intention. They'll only see the impact. And impact is loud. People fear those who can act decisively because they cannot. People judge those who make hard choices because they avoid them. People resent those who rise because every rise reminds them of their own stagnation. That's why the people who call you ruthless are often the same ones who quietly benefit from your decisions. You've already felt glimpses of this. You've had moments where you chose to be firm, and suddenly people who never cared about you before started calling you changed, cold, different. They didn't mean it as a compliment. They meant it as a warning. Stop growing. Your growth threatens our control. They preferred the version of you that bowed down, apologized quickly, tolerated nonsense, and sacrificed your peace for their comfort. That version of you served their interests, not yours. If a stronger, wiser, more assertive version of you scares people, that means you're finally becoming someone real. The truth is that necessary evil isn't a moment. It's a transition. It starts with a question. What am I willing to lose in order to win what truly matters? And that question keeps echoing inside you until one day something happens that forces you to answer it. Sometimes it's betrayal, the kind that rips your trust apart and leaves you staring at a version of yourself you don't recognize. You realize you were loyal to people who were never loyal to you. You realize you were transparent with people who used your honesty as a weapon. You realize you were supportive to people who only stood with you when it was convenient. Betrayal doesn't change your values. It clarifies them. It shows you exactly where you were too soft, too trusting, too forgiving. It teaches you the first rule of power. Loyalty must be reciprocated, not begged for. Sometimes it's loss, not emotional heartbreak, but the loss of potential, the things you could have had if you weren't afraid, opportunities you missed, doors you didn't knock on, risks you didn't take, skills you didn't sharpen. The regret that grows from this is quieter than pain, but far more dangerous. Pain burns for a while, regret haunts forever. And sometimes it's exhaustion. You get tired of being stepped on. You get tired of giving too much and receiving too little. You get tired of explaining yourself to people who don't listen. You get tired of carrying others while no one carries you. Exhaustion is the birthplace of transformation. When you're tired enough, you stop caring about opinions and start caring about outcomes. You stop trying to look good and start trying to live well. Then comes the moment. Every powerful person has lived it, when you realize the world will never hand you what you want. And the moment you understand that, something breaks inside you. But it's not your goodness, it's your fear. And when fear breaks, clarity enters. You begin thinking ruthlessly, not because you want to harm people, but because you finally understand that protecting your purpose requires strength the old you never had. You start choosing what you once avoided. Confrontation over silence, standards over sympathy, boundaries over approval, decisions over delay, outcomes over intentions. But the climax of Chapter 2 is this. You experience your first true, necessary evil, not in theory, but in reality. It happens unexpectedly. Someone crosses a line. Someone tests your patience. Someone takes advantage of your kindness one too many times. Or maybe an opportunity appears, a rare, life-changing one, and the only way to grab it is by disappointing someone who always expected you to stay small. It's at that moment you apply the four-question test without even realizing it. Is the end worth it? Yes, because this time, the end is your growth, your peace, your future. Is there a cleaner alternative? No, because you've already tried softness, patience, silence. It failed you. Can your reputation survive it? Yes, because the people who matter will understand, and the people who don't will reveal themselves. Can you carry the psychological cost? Yes, because the cost of not acting is far heavier. So you make the decision. You step forward. You act. Not out of rage, not out of ego, but out of clarity. And the world reacts exactly as expected. Some people get shocked, some get offended, some pull away, some whisper. But something shocking happens inside you. You don't break. You don't collapse. You don't regret. For the first time in your life, you feel power. Not power over others, power over yourself, power over fear, power over hesitation, power over the version of you that always surrendered. And in that moment, you finally understand, necessary evil isn't evil, it is evolution. Not becoming a monster, but finally becoming a man who refuses to be eaten by monsters. That is the turning point. That is the climax of your transformation. Chapter 2 doesn't end with you becoming ruthless. It ends with you becoming responsible. Because the true enemy was never morality. It was the weakness disguised as morality. And the true victory was never about defeating others. It was about defeating the timid version of yourself that was never meant to lead your life. You walk into Chapter 3 not as the person you were, but as the person you were always meant to become. There comes a moment in every person's life when the world stops lying to them. It doesn't happen loudly. There's no announcement, no dramatic music, no warning. It happens in silence, one painful realization at a time, until the picture becomes so clear that you can't pretend anymore. You can't act innocent. You can't act confused. You can't hide behind softness. The illusions you carried your whole life fall off your shoulders. And what remains is a truth so sharp it cuts through every past version of you. The truth is simple. Life is conflict. Maybe quiet, maybe subtle, maybe disguised behind politeness and smiles. But conflict is constant. People compete for status, for validation, for money, for control, for opportunity, for love, for peace, for identity. Some fight openly, some fight silently, some fight cowardly, some fight cleverly. But everyone is fighting something. The only difference is whether you acknowledge the battlefield or pretend you're not standing in the middle of it. For the longest time, you were told the world is safe. That danger only exists in stories. That conflict is rare. That betrayal is extraordinary. That competition is unhealthy. That ambition is threatening. They told you this because they needed you unprepared. A prepared person becomes unstoppable. An unprepared person becomes manageable. And you were made manageable, tamed, softened, trained to believe that the right path is the peaceful path, even if that peace comes from swallowing your pain quietly. But the truth you learned in Chapter 2 changed everything. Once you saw the machinery behind necessary evil, once you saw that responsibility sometimes looks ruthless, once you understood how much strength is required to protect your future, something inside you shifted forever. You stopped being afraid of being misunderstood. You stopped apologizing for defending yourself. You stopped treating your own needs as optional. And that shift, the one people will call new behavior, is actually just you finally behaving like the version of yourself you buried under years of obedience. This is where the transformation becomes irreversible. You begin noticing things that were always around you, but invisible before, like how people who claim to love peace are often the first ones to start chaos when their comfort is threatened. How the people who preach morality are often the ones who hide the darkest intentions. How the people who call themselves victims are often the architects of manipulation. You start seeing the patterns, the games, the tactics, the traps, and instead of being intimidated, you feel strangely calm. Awareness gives you control. That's when you begin crafting something only powerful people possess, your personal code. Not the code you were taught, not the code society expects, but the one you choose, consciously, strategically, powerfully. A code is not about becoming ruthless. It's about becoming precise. It's about knowing which lines you will never cross and which lines you will, without hesitation, if your mission demands it. It's about defining your moral boundaries instead of letting others define them for you. It's about choosing the kind of damage you will never inflict, and the kind you are willing to inflict if it protects something sacred. Your code becomes your armor, your compass, your silent guide, the thing that allows you to be dangerous without becoming destructive. It gives your strength direction. It gives your ambition discipline. It gives your decisions moral clarity. The world fears people without a code. They are unpredictable. But the world respects people with a code. They are unshakable. And as this code forms inside you, you feel a new kind of presence rising in you. Not arrogance, not ego, not aggression. Something deeper, a controlled danger. A calm, steady awareness of your own power. A confidence that doesn't need to shout. A self-respect that doesn't need validation. A readiness that never fully sleeps. People feel it before you even speak. They sense it in your posture, your silence, your eyes. It's the aura of someone who can bite but chooses not to. Someone who can walk away from chaos or walk through it, depending on what the situation demands. This is the moment when harmlessness dies and power is born. But power comes with consequences, loud ones. As soon as you stop playing small, people begin revealing who they truly are. Some become intimidated, not because you changed, but because your evolution exposed their stagnation. Some become defensive because your confidence reminds them of their lack of courage. Some become resentful because your boundaries remove the access they once enjoyed. Some become quietly respectful, realizing you've stepped into a version of yourself they always knew you were capable of becoming. And then, unexpectedly, some people start admiring you, not because you are perfect, but because you are decisive. Not because you avoid conflict, but because you face it. Not because you are agreeable, but because you are authentic. In a world where everyone is pretending, the person who stands firm becomes magnetic. But your greatest test comes when life presents you with a choice that defines your legacy. A moment where obedience promises comfort, but power demands sacrifice. A crossroads where the old you whispers, "Play safe," and the new you answers, "Play true." This moment is not dramatic. It may happen in a simple decision, an opportunity, a confrontation, a relationship, a responsibility, a risk, but its weight shapes everything that comes after. If you choose obedience, your life remains predictable, controlled, forgettable. The world won't punish you, because you won't matter enough to punish. You'll blend into the crowd, unnoticed, unchallenged, unremembered. But if you choose danger, controlled, strategic, responsible danger, you step into a life that has impact, a life that requires strength, a life that demands accountability, a life that will test you, stretch you, sharpen you, a life where you will be both admired and criticized, a life where you will make choices the world may never understand, but will always feel, a life that echoes after you're gone. And that is the true theme of your final transformation. You were never meant to be harmless. You were meant to be capable. Capable of choosing peace when it is wise and choosing conflict when it is necessary. Capable of building, protecting, confronting, deciding. Capable of being gentle when the moment calls for softness and unbreakable when the moment calls for strength. Capable of walking away from what insults your soul and walking into what challenges your fear. Capable of being both kind and dangerous because real goodness requires the ability to enforce it. The climax of your evolution is this. You finally understand that being feared or being loved is not the real question. The real question is whether you have the strength to be both when the moment demands it. Whether you can carry the weight of your decisions without collapsing. Whether you can stand in the storm without asking it to be gentle. Whether you can face the world without apologizing for existing powerfully. The world doesn't need another obedient man. It needs a man who understands himself. A man who carries his past with wisdom, not shame. A man who knows what he stands for and what he will never tolerate. A man who can shape his environment instead of being shaped by it. A man who is dangerous, not because he harms, but because he can protect. Not because he destroys, but because he can choose not to destroy. Not because he is cruel, but because he is capable. Your journey doesn't end with becoming moral or immoral. It ends with becoming sovereign, free from illusions, free from fear, free from the script you were forced to follow, free to write your own. And that is the greatest power any human being can ever possess. Not harmlessness, not innocence, not obedience, but self-mastery. This is where your story truly begins. Not as a good man, not as a bad man, but as a man who finally knows exactly who he is and who he is willing to become.